Sarah stood behind the counter, her eyes tired but alert, watching the steady stream of customers that came in and out of the small coffee shop. The steam rising from the espresso machine blurred her thoughts, and her hands moved on autopilot as she wiped down the counter. Her pregnant belly, now noticeable even under the oversized apron, made her feel more tired than usual. But what was she supposed to do? She had to keep going. Her mind drifted as she glanced at the clock. It was nearly closing time, and she was counting the minutes until she could go home, put her feet up, and try to forget the constant weight of the world pressing on her shoulders. She had dreams, but they felt like distant memories now, lost in the daily grind of trying to make ends meet and figuring out how to raise a child on her own. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from her sister. "How are you holding up?" She quickly typed back, "I'm fine, just tired." That was a lie, but it was easier to say than explaining how scared she really felt. She knew her sister meant well, but Sarah had learned the hard way that some things were too heavy to share. As the door to the cafe jingled open, Sarah's gaze lifted, ready to serve the next customer. But then, she froze for a moment. A man in a simple black jacket and sunglasses walked in, one that looked oddly familiar. There was something about him, the way he carried himself, that felt different from the usual rush of customers she dealt with. He was Keanu Reeves. Her heart skipped a beat. The Keanu Reeves. She tried not to let her surprise show as she stepped forward to take his order. "Focus, Sarah. This is just another customer, just another order." "Hey, can I get a medium Americano?" His voice was calm, kind, almost too normal for someone who had graced the big screen in some of the most iconic action movies. "Of course, right away," she said, trying to sound professional despite the inner storm brewing inside her. As she worked on his drink, her hands shook slightly, and she cursed herself for looking so flustered. She wasn't usually like this, but something about his presence made it hard to think clearly. While making the coffee, she found herself glancing up at him, watching as he dug around in his jacket pocket. He was alone. No entourage, no fuss. Just him. He didn't seem like the kind of person who craved attention, and Sarah was oddly comforted by that. "Here you go," she said, handing him the cup with a smile. "Thanks," he replied, offering a small, warm smile in return. "How's your day going?" She blinked, taken aback by the casualness of the question. It wasn't a usual line from a celebrity, he was asking as if he genuinely cared. For a second, Sarah felt like maybe he wasn't just a figure on the screen, but a real person. "It's okay. Tired, you know," she responded, her voice quieter than she'd intended. "Yeah, I get that," he said. "Long days can be rough." There was a brief silence. Sarah stood there, the hum of the coffee shop surrounding them. He took a sip of his drink, looking around as if he wasn't in a rush, as if this was just another ordinary day for him. But to Sarah, it felt surreal. The reality of the situation was sinking in, Keanu Reeves, in her little cafe, talking to her like she was just another person. Then, just as he turned to leave, Sarah's nerves got the best of her. She grabbed a napkin and quickly scribbled a message on it, "I don't know how to keep going. I'm scared and alone, and I don't know what to do." She folded it up and, without thinking, tucked it into the back of his receipt. The second she did it, her heart raced. What the hell did I just do? She cursed herself under her breath, shaking her head. She was just overwhelmed, desperate, and the idea of him reading those words felt vulnerable. Was it too much? Would he think she was crazy? She couldn't take it back now. But before she could second-guess herself, Keanu turned back around. He caught her eyes for a brief moment, then nodded with a kind smile. "Take care of yourself, all right?" She watched as he left, the door jingling behind him. The room suddenly felt colder, emptier. As she stood there, staring at the empty space where he'd just been, a mix of emotions swirled in her chest. She had no idea if he would even read the note, let alone respond. But there was a strange sense of relief, as if, in that moment, she had done something that might make a difference, even if it was small. She took a deep breath. Maybe I'm just crazy, she thought. But then again, maybe that message would spark something, or maybe it would be just another forgotten moment in the grand scheme of things. Still, as she cleaned the counter, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The following day felt strangely normal. Sarah woke up early, her body aching from the weight of her pregnancy and the emotional strain of the past few days. She tried to convince herself that it was just another typical day, another day of work, of getting by, but something about the encounter with Keanu Reeves lingered in the back of her mind. The message she had written on his receipt seemed ridiculous now. Why had she even done it? It wasn't like she expected him to actually care. As she made her way to the coffee shop, the uncertainty weighed on her. Her shift began as usual. The place was busy, the hum of chatter filling the air, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with the faint whiff of pastries. Yet, despite the normalcy of everything around her, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. At lunch, she took a quick break to check her phone, expecting to see a few casual messages from her sister or friends. But instead, there was something unexpected, a notification. Keanu Reeves has sent you a message. Her heart stopped. She stared at the screen for a few seconds, unsure if she was seeing things. Could it really be him? There was no way. She opened the message slowly, her fingers trembling as she read the words. Hey Sarah, I got your note. I just wanted to say, I hear you. I can't promise to fix everything, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Take care of yourself. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Was this real? This was Keanu Reeves, the guy from the movies, the one who seemed so untouchable. Yet, here he was, acknowledging her, reaching out to her in a way that made her feel seen. Her stomach flipped. She stared at the message for a long time, rereading it over and over. She had no idea what to do next. Should she reply? Was it okay to accept his kindness? She couldn't help but feel like she was in over her head. She was just a small-town woman, trying to survive, and now a celebrity was offering her, what? Help? There was a part of her that wanted to shut down the conversation right then and there, to ignore it and pretend it never happened. After all, what was she even supposed to say? But another part of her, the part that had been struggling in silence for so long, felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in a while, hope. Before she could talk herself out of it, Sarah typed a response. I don't know what to say. I wasn't expecting you to respond at all. I didn't think you'd even read my note. But thank you. I don't know what's next, but your message means a lot to me. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. The message felt raw, but it was the truth. She wasn't looking for a miracle. She wasn't even sure what she was looking for. But somehow, Keanu's response made her feel less alone. As she hit send, Sarah glanced at the clock. The minutes seemed to tick by slower than usual. Was she really having this conversation with him? She wasn't sure how long she could keep it together. She was so used to being strong, to keeping everything bottled up inside. But now, for the first time in a long while, she found herself opening up to someone. Not just anyone, but someone who seemed to understand, even if only in a small way. She wasn't sure if it was the pregnancy or the weight of her life's struggles, but something about this moment made her feel vulnerable. She wasn't used to letting people in, especially not someone like Keanu. But before she could overthink it, another notification popped up. Sarah, I get it. You're not alone in this, even if it feels like you are sometimes. If you're open to it, let's meet. I'll be in town tomorrow, and I'd love to chat. No pressure, just a conversation. She stared at the message, her mind racing. A meeting? Should she really do this? Was this some kind of prank, or was this actually happening? Keanu Reeves wanted to meet her. This wasn't a fantasy. She thought about her situation. She thought about the endless hours she'd spent working, about the lonely nights when the only sound was the beating of her own heart. She thought about her unborn child and how, no matter what, she was determined to make it work. But sometimes, it was hard to know how. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitating for a moment before she typed her reply. I'd like that. Thank you. I'll see you tomorrow. And just like that, the uncertainty began to fade, replaced by a flutter of anticipation. What would this meeting bring? What was Keanu's intention? She couldn't be sure, but something in her gut told her this could be the turning point she desperately needed. The next day arrived quickly. As Sarah prepared for the meeting, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She didn't know what to expect. What would they talk about? Would she be able to hold her own in a conversation with someone like him? All these questions flooded her mind. When the time came, she stood outside the cafe, anxiously glancing at her phone, waiting. The minutes stretched on, each second feeling like a small eternity. And then, she saw him. Keanu was walking toward her, a soft smile on his face. He didn't look anything like the larger-than-life figure she had seen on screen. He looked just like any other guy, wearing a simple jacket and jeans. Yet, there was something about him that made Sarah feel like she was meeting someone who truly cared. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice warm and genuine. "Thanks for meeting me." She gave him a nervous smile, feeling a strange combination of excitement and fear. "Thank you for reaching out," she replied. "I wasn't sure what to expect." Keanu's smile deepened as they sat down. The conversation started slow, but soon, the awkwardness began to fade. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like she wasn't alone in her struggles. As they talked, she found herself sharing things she hadn't told anyone, things that weighed heavily on her heart. And Keanu listened. Really listened. There was no judgment, no rush to offer advice. Just an understanding that made Sarah feel lighter. And for the first time in a long time, she dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her after all. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Sarah. What had started as an unexpected meeting with Keanu turned into something far more profound than she could have ever imagined. Their conversations continued, though they were far from ordinary. Every time they met, it felt like Sarah was peeling back another layer of herself, one she hadn't even realized existed until she started to talk to him. Keanu wasn't like anyone she'd ever known. He listened without judgment, spoke with a gentle wisdom that surprised her, and made her feel like she mattered. To him, she wasn't just a pregnant woman working a coffee shop. She was Sarah, the woman with dreams, struggles, and strength, even if she didn't always see it in herself. But still, Sarah found herself questioning everything. Why was he doing this? Was he just being kind because he felt sorry for her, or was there something more? She tried not to think too much about it, telling herself to take things day by day. But the more she got to know him, the more she found herself drawn to him, in a way that went beyond gratitude. One afternoon, as she was preparing for her shift, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Keanu. "How's your day going?" Sarah smiled, a warm feeling spreading through her chest. She had grown used to these little check-ins. Despite the occasional doubts, Keanu had never once made her feel like she was bothering him. Every message, every conversation, felt genuine. "It's going well," Sarah typed back. "Busy, but I'm managing. How about you?" The response came almost immediately. "Same here. You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said last time, about how things have been tough for you." Sarah hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. That conversation had been a turning point. She had opened up to him about her fears, her frustrations, and her uncertainties. It was hard to admit to someone, especially someone like him, that she didn't have everything figured out. But Keanu had taken it all in stride, offering support without pushing her to open up more than she was ready to. "I didn't expect you to remember everything," Sarah replied, her thumb moving slowly over the keyboard. "But I appreciate you listening." Keanu's message came through again. "It's hard to forget something like that, Sarah. You've been through a lot, and you're handling it better than you think." She felt a lump form in her throat at his words. It was hard to believe that she was handling anything well, but somehow, hearing him say it made her feel like she wasn't completely lost. Maybe, just maybe, she was on the right path. The next day, after her shift, Sarah found herself standing outside the cafe, waiting for Keanu to arrive. She had agreed to meet him again, this time at a local park, and as much as she tried to calm her nerves, her heart raced with anticipation. This time felt different. The connection between them was undeniable, and Sarah wasn't sure if it was something she should act on or if it was just a fleeting moment in her life, a moment she could look back on fondly but not build anything from. Keanu arrived right on time, just like always. He gave her a warm smile, and the tension in Sarah's chest seemed to ease, just a little. It felt like no time had passed since their last conversation. They sat down on a park bench, the sounds of the world moving around them as the sun began to set, casting a soft orange glow over everything. "How are you today?" Keanu asked, his voice soft. "Better," Sarah admitted, glancing at him. "I don't feel as alone as I did before we started talking." Keanu nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "You're never really alone, Sarah. You just have to remember that there's always something or someone there, even if it doesn't seem that way." She bit her lip, feeling a swell of emotion rising inside her. "I wish I could believe that. Sometimes, it feels like everything is falling apart, and there's no way to fix it." "You're stronger than you think," he said simply. "You've been through so much, and yet you're still standing. That takes strength. It takes courage." Sarah looked at him, searching his eyes for any sign of insincerity. But there was none. His gaze was steady, comforting, and for once, Sarah allowed herself to believe his words. She felt a warmth spread through her, a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. The world seemed a little less cold. They sat in silence for a few moments, just listening to the sounds of the park. The breeze rustled the leaves, children played in the distance, and the soft murmur of voices blended with the occasional sound of a passing car. It was peaceful. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt at peace. Keanu broke the silence. "You mentioned last time that you were struggling with the idea of becoming a mom on your own. How are you feeling about that?" Sarah's heart skipped. The question wasn't easy to answer. There were days when she felt certain she could handle it, that she would rise to the challenge and make it work. But other days, it was hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Scared I won't be enough. Scared I won't know what to do. I don't know if I'm ready for all this responsibility." Keanu listened intently, his expression softening as she spoke. "It's okay to be scared," he said. "But the fact that you're even thinking about it, that you're worried about being a good mom, it shows how much you care. And that's what matters. You'll figure it out. You always do." She looked down at her hands, suddenly self-conscious. "But what if I can't? What if I mess it all up?" "You won't," Keanu said, his voice firm but kind. "You may not have all the answers now, but you'll learn. You'll find your way. And remember, you're not alone in this. You've got people who care about you." For a long moment, Sarah didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to express how much his words meant to her, how much it meant that someone like him, was here, reminding her that she was capable, that she wasn't alone. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Anytime." And just like that, Sarah felt a shift inside her. The weight of her fears didn't disappear, but it felt a little lighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. They talked a little longer, and when the sun finally dipped below the horizon, Sarah realized that the connection between them had become something more than just casual conversation. It was real. And for the first time in a while, Sarah allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something better, a future where she wasn't just surviving, but truly living. As they said their goodbyes, Keanu gave her a hug, and it was the kind of hug that spoke volumes, comforting, reassuring, and full of unspoken understanding. As Sarah watched him walk away, her heart was full of hope. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, but she was starting to see that sometimes, it wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about taking the first step, trusting in the journey, and knowing that even when things felt uncertain, she didn't have to face them alone. The next few days after that meeting with Keanu felt like a mix of clarity and uncertainty. Sarah couldn't help but replay their conversation in her mind over and over again, trying to make sense of everything she was feeling. There was a sense of peace that had come over her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. But it wasn't just about Keanu's words, it was about how his presence had given her a glimmer of hope. A reminder that maybe things weren't as impossible as they seemed. But the doubt started to creep back in. She was still pregnant, still working long hours at the cafe, still facing the challenges of being a single mom-to-be. The reality of her situation hadn't changed. And even though Keanu's words echoed in her mind, it was hard to shake off the feelings of loneliness that came with her circumstances. One evening, after an exhausting day at work, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the clock on the wall. It was almost midnight, and she knew she should be getting some sleep, but her mind was racing. She pulled out her phone and checked for any messages. There was nothing. No texts from her family, no notifications from friends. The silence was deafening. She sighed and scrolled through her contacts, her finger hovering over her sister's name. They hadn't talked much lately, not since Sarah had become so wrapped up in everything. But now, more than ever, she needed someone to talk to. She needed to hear from someone who knew her, someone who understood. Taking a deep breath, she sent a message. "Hey, it's been a while. I've been thinking about everything and just wanted to reach out. Hope you're doing okay." Within minutes, her phone buzzed. It was her sister, Claire. "Sarah. Wow. It's so good to hear from you. I've been thinking about you too. Everything okay? How's the baby?" Sarah smiled at the message. Claire always had a way of making her feel seen, even when everything else felt chaotic. She quickly typed back. "I'm managing. The baby's fine, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed lately. It's hard to explain." Claire's response came almost immediately. "I get it. I know things haven't been easy for you. But you're one of the strongest people I know. Don't forget that." Sarah's heart warmed at her sister's words. It had been so long since she had felt like anyone was really rooting for her. She had become so accustomed to being independent, to keeping her struggles hidden, that she forgot what it felt like to lean on someone else. "I don't know what I'm doing sometimes," Sarah admitted. "I feel like I'm just trying to get through the days without completely falling apart." "You don't have to have everything figured out," Claire replied. "No one does. But you've got people who care about you, including me. You're not in this alone, Sarah." Tears stung Sarah's eyes. She hadn't realized just how much she needed to hear that. "Thank you," Sarah typed back, her fingers trembling slightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." There was a long pause before Claire's next message came through. You don't ever have to do it alone. Ever. And if you need anything, anything at all, I'm here. Sarah let out a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. The weight of her fears, her doubts, her anxieties, began to lift just a little. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, but she had people who cared. She had her sister. And she had Keanu, though she wasn't entirely sure what that relationship was becoming. But for now, that was enough. The next day, Sarah met up with Keanu again. She wasn't sure what they would talk about, but she found that her meetings with him had become something she looked forward to. Despite her uncertainties, she felt safe with him in a way that was hard to explain. When she arrived at the cafe where they had agreed to meet, she spotted Keanu right away. He was sitting at a table near the window, his dark hair falling just slightly over his eyes as he glanced up from his phone. "Hey," Sarah said, walking up to the table. "You're early today." Keanu smiled, looking up at her. "I'm just trying to make sure we have time to talk. I know your schedule can be crazy." Sarah slid into the seat across from him. "Yeah, it definitely can be." For a moment, they sat in silence, just enjoying the peaceful atmosphere of the cafe. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort whenever she was around Keanu. It wasn't romantic, it was more like the calm before a storm. A reminder that maybe, just maybe, things would work out. "So, how are you doing today?" Keanu asked, his voice steady. Sarah paused before answering, unsure of how to put her feelings into words. "I've had better days. But I think I'm doing okay. I reached out to my sister last night, and it felt good to hear from her." Keanu nodded, his expression understanding. "That's good. You don't have to do everything on your own, you know." "I know," Sarah said, her voice soft. "It's just hard sometimes to admit that I need help." "It's not a weakness," Keanu said gently. "We all need help. And the people who truly care about you will be there, no matter what." Sarah looked down at her hands, taking in his words. She had spent so much time trying to protect herself, trying to keep everyone at arm's length, that she forgot what it felt like to let people in. To allow herself to be vulnerable. "I think I've been afraid," she said, looking up at him. "Afraid that if I let people in, they'll see that I'm not as strong as I pretend to be." Keanu smiled, his eyes soft. "The people who care about you don't want perfection. They just want you. And they'll be there for you when you need them, even when you feel weak." Sarah felt a lump form in her throat at his words. She had spent so long trying to be everything for everyone, trying to be perfect, trying to do it all. But maybe, just maybe, she could let go of that pressure and allow herself to be human. To be vulnerable. To accept help. As the conversation continued, Sarah realized that Keanu wasn't just offering her advice. He was showing her a way forward, one where she didn't have to carry everything alone. He was offering her something that was just as important as any advice, a reminder that she was worthy of love, of support, and of hope. By the time they parted ways, Sarah felt lighter, more at peace. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that she didn't have to figure everything out by herself. As she walked home that evening, the cool air brushing against her skin, she found herself smiling. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. The days blurred together as Sarah settled into a routine. The cafe, with its warm cups of coffee and the constant hum of conversation, became a place of quiet refuge from her own thoughts. She found herself leaning on Keanu's support more than she'd expected, and in turn, their connection deepened. Every time they met, their conversation seemed to uncover another layer of themselves, revealing more shared moments of vulnerability, laughter, and understanding. But despite the growing bond between them, Sarah couldn't ignore the underlying tension she felt. There was still so much she didn't know about him. His life, his past, his true feelings. For someone who had become such an integral part of her world, Keanu remained an enigma. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when Sarah's world turned upside down. She was finishing up her shift at the cafe when the door opened, and in walked Keanu, looking as calm and composed as always. But today, there was something different in the air. Something about the way he walked in, as though he was carrying a burden he hadn't shared. He spotted her behind the counter, gave her a small wave, and walked over. "Hey," he said, his voice sounding more serious than usual. "Got a minute?" "Of course," Sarah replied, wiping her hands on a towel. She was immediately aware of the heaviness in his tone. "Is everything okay?" Keanu hesitated before speaking. "I wanted to talk to you about something. Something I've been holding back." The sudden gravity in his words caught Sarah off guard. She took a deep breath and motioned toward the staff room, feeling the familiar knot of worry tightening in her chest. "Let's go talk." Once inside, Keanu leaned against the wall, staring down at the floor for a moment before meeting her eyes. "I've been keeping something from you, Sarah. Something important." Her heart started to race. The unease that had settled in her chest earlier began to expand. What was he going to say? Was this a conversation that would change everything? "I'm not just some random guy you met at a coffee shop," Keanu began, his voice a little softer now. "I've been thinking a lot about how much I've shared with you. And I realize there's something I should have told you from the beginning." Sarah's throat went dry. "Keanu, what is it?" Keanu took a deep breath, and the words finally spilled out. "I'm not just here for a casual visit. I came to town because I'm dealing with some personal stuff. I've been in the public eye for a long time, and I just needed to get away. The truth is, I'm not just someone who pops in for coffee. I've been in hiding, trying to figure out my own life." Sarah's mind was racing. She tried to process his words, but they felt like a puzzle she couldn't quite piece together. "What do you mean, hiding? Are you in some kind of trouble?" Keanu shook his head, his eyes distant. "Not trouble. Just complications. Personal issues I've been trying to work through. It's been a long road, but I needed a break. And when I came here, I never expected to meet someone like you. But now, I don't want you to think that I've been lying to you or keeping something from you for no reason. I just didn't know how to explain everything." The pieces were slowly beginning to fall into place, but Sarah still felt a sense of confusion. She couldn't quite grasp what he was saying. "Keanu, I don't understand. Are you saying you're someone else? Like, someone famous?" Keanu looked down, a trace of guilt flickering in his eyes. "I'm not someone else, not really. But yes. I'm Keanu Reeves." He paused, his gaze searching hers for some sign of recognition, but all Sarah could do was stare at him, stunned. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Sarah felt a wave of disbelief rush over her, followed by a sharp pang of confusion. Her heart was pounding in her chest, and her thoughts were spinning. "Keanu," she whispered, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "But, how? Why?" "I don't," she stopped, taking a step back. "Why would you hide that from me?" Keanu's face softened, and he stepped closer. "I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want you to see me as a celebrity or to treat me differently because of who I am. I just wanted to be someone real for you, someone you could talk to. And I thought maybe if I kept that part of myself private, we could just connect." The room felt too small, the air too thick. Sarah was overwhelmed by the sudden revelation. Of all the things she had expected, this was the last thing on her mind. The man she had been talking to, the one who had shown her so much kindness, who had helped her see that she wasn't alone, was none other than Keanu Reeves. It felt like a movie scene, like one of those bizarre twists of fate that only happened in stories. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. And she had no idea how to respond. "Why didn't you just tell me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to," Keanu said, his voice low. "But I was afraid. Afraid of what you'd think. I didn't want to come off as some guy trying to get attention or use my fame for something else. I wanted to be, just Keanu. The guy who makes bad jokes, the guy who listens when you need someone. Not the guy on the big screen." Sarah stood frozen, her mind whirling. Her heart still beat fast, and she was torn between shock, confusion, and a strange sense of understanding. Despite everything, despite the truth she'd just learned, she realized that the essence of who Keanu was, the one she'd been connecting with, hadn't changed. He was still the person who listened, who cared, who offered her hope when she needed it the most. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" she asked again, her voice shaking slightly. Keanu took a deep breath and stepped closer, his eyes full of sincerity. "Because I was scared. I was scared that if you knew, you'd see me as just the guy who's famous and not the guy who's been there for you. I didn't want to lose what we have." Sarah's mind was still trying to catch up, but something about his words hit her. Despite everything, despite the fame, the mystery, and the fear, Keanu had been real with her. And for all his fame, he was still just a man, looking for connection, just like she was. Slowly, Sarah exhaled and met his eyes. "Okay," she said softly. "I get it now." Keanu smiled, a relief washing over his face. "I'm sorry for not being upfront with you sooner. I never wanted to hurt you." Sarah gave him a small, understanding nod. She wasn't sure what all this meant yet, or where things would go from here, but one thing was clear, the bond they had built was real. And no matter how complicated the situation was, that couldn't change. She took a deep breath, still processing, but at least for now, she didn't feel alone in her confusion. For better or for worse, they were in this together. And somehow, that felt like enough. In the days following Keanu's revelation, Sarah's mind seemed to be in a constant state of turmoil. She couldn't escape the feeling of being caught in a whirlwind, where everything she thought she knew about herself and the world around her was being turned upside down. Keanu Reeves, the man she had come to trust, had shared a truth that not only changed the course of their relationship but also cast a shadow over every moment they had shared so far. The weight of his fame loomed large, and Sarah couldn't quite figure out how to reconcile this new information with the person she had gotten to know. It wasn't just about Keanu anymore, it was about her own feelings. She had been drawn to him as a person, not as a celebrity. She had confided in him, shared her struggles, and allowed herself to be vulnerable. But now, with the truth laid bare, she couldn't shake the question, was she still just someone he cared for, or was she now a part of his world of fame, scrutiny, and public attention? Her thoughts were interrupted when she saw Keanu waiting for her at the cafe, as they had agreed. As soon as their eyes met, Sarah could see the faint trace of uncertainty in his expression. He wasn't just waiting for her, he was waiting for her to figure out how she felt. "Hey," Sarah greeted him softly as she walked up to their usual table. "Hey," Keanu replied, his voice quiet, but there was a warmth in it that made her feel at ease. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air was thick with the unspoken questions hanging between them. Sarah took a deep breath before sitting down across from him. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, and it made her uncomfortable. She knew he was probably wondering if she was going to push him away now, or if everything between them would change forever. "How are you doing?" Keanu asked, breaking the silence. She paused, considering the question carefully. How was she doing? She was overwhelmed, confused, and yes, still processing everything he had shared. But at the same time, something in her refused to let go of the connection they had. "I'm okay," she said carefully, her voice steady but her emotions raw. "I'm just trying to figure this out. It's a lot to take in." Keanu nodded, understanding. "I know. And I didn't want to drop this on you like I did. I thought that maybe by being honest, I'd show you that I want to be with you for the right reasons. Not because of my fame, but because I genuinely care about you." Sarah's heart swelled at his words. The sincerity in his voice made her want to believe that everything would be okay, that they could move past this obstacle together. But still, the doubts lingered. Was it possible for her to fully embrace this new reality? Could she handle being in a relationship with someone who would always be under the public's gaze? "I don't know what it's like," Sarah admitted, her voice quiet but vulnerable. "I don't know what it's like to live in your world, to be constantly in the spotlight, to have everything you do scrutinized." Keanu leaned forward, his gaze soft but unwavering. "And I don't want that for you. I don't want you to feel like you have to live in that world just because of me. That's why I wanted to keep this private for as long as I could. But I can't hide who I am forever, and I don't want you to feel like you're just another chapter in the public's eye." Sarah felt a pang of sadness in her chest. Despite his reassurances, she could still feel the divide between their worlds. She was a regular person with everyday struggles, working at a cafe, trying to make ends meet, and preparing for the biggest change in her life, becoming a mother. Keanu, on the other hand, lived in a realm where his every move was watched, analyzed, and dissected. How could she possibly fit into that? For the first time, she allowed herself to ask the question that had been lingering in the back of her mind since the truth had been revealed: was she enough? "I don't want you to feel pressured, Keanu," Sarah said slowly, her words measured. "But what does this mean for us? I mean, what happens now that I know who you are?" Keanu's expression softened, and he reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. His touch was warm, grounding her as she wrestled with her emotions. "What happens now is up to us. I won't push you into a world you're not comfortable with. But if you're willing to take this journey with me, then we'll figure it out together. I want to be with you, Sarah. I'm not asking you to change your life to fit into mine. I just want to be there for you, and I want you to be there for me." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. There it was, the choice. She could walk away, retreat into her safe, comfortable world, where she knew the boundaries and the risks. Or she could take a leap of faith, step into the unknown, and see where this connection with Keanu could lead. Her mind raced as she considered everything: her pregnancy, her family, the future she had envisioned for herself. But in that moment, she realized something. She had spent so much of her life trying to control everything, to make sure she never let anyone too close, that she had missed out on the chance to truly experience life as it came. And maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to change that. To allow herself to be open, to trust, and to embrace something unexpected. "I don't have all the answers, Keanu," Sarah said, her voice steady but full of emotion. "But I know one thing: I want to see where this goes. I don't know what that looks like, or what the future holds, but I'm willing to try. Together." Keanu's eyes lit up, and he smiled, the kind of smile that reached all the way to his eyes. It was a smile that told her everything she needed to know. No matter what the world said, no matter the hurdles they would face, he was there with her. And for the first time in a long while, Sarah felt like maybe, just maybe, they could make it work. "Thank you," Keanu said, his voice thick with gratitude. "I promise, I'll do everything I can to make sure you never feel alone in this." As they sat there, hand in hand, the storm outside seemed to quiet, and for the first time in a while, Sarah felt a sense of calm wash over her. Maybe life didn't have all the answers. Maybe there would be challenges, both big and small. But whatever came their way, she knew one thing: she wouldn't have to face it alone. And for Sarah, that was the start of something new. Something full of hope, uncertainty, and possibility. As the days passed, Sarah couldn't help but feel the growing weight of Keanu's world on her shoulders. Though he had promised her that their relationship would remain separate from the celebrity life he led, she knew it wasn't as simple as he made it sound. The truth was, nothing in his life was ever truly private. Every movement, every word, every moment in public was scrutinized. That was the reality she would have to face now. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when the first ripple of change came. Sarah was closing up the cafe, the warm glow of the lights reflecting off the polished wooden counters, when her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and froze. Keanu Reeves spotted at local cafe, new romance brewing? The headline was plastered all over social media, accompanied by photos of Keanu leaving the cafe, his hand resting gently on Sarah's back as they laughed together. The pictures were innocent enough, but the comments, the questions, they felt like a tidal wave crashing over her. "Who's the girl?" one comment asked. "Is this some sort of PR stunt?" "Keanu deserves someone better than her," another user wrote. Her stomach twisted. The comments were harsh, judgmental, and invasive. She felt the sting of every word as though it were directed at her personally. She wasn't prepared for this. The public had never been kind to celebrities' personal lives, but now it was her life, too, that was under the microscope. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the posts, each one a reminder of the world she had just stepped into. And no matter how hard she tried to ignore it, she knew she couldn't escape it. "Sarah?" She turned to find Keanu standing at the door of the cafe, looking more concerned than she had ever seen him. He had seen the same posts. "I didn't want this for you," he said, walking over to her, his voice filled with guilt. "I didn't think it would happen so fast. I should have prepared you for this." She put her phone down and ran a hand through her hair, trying to steady herself. "I didn't think it would happen either. I knew you were famous, but this," she waved her hand in frustration. "I didn't know how public everything would be. It feels like I can't breathe. Like I'm being suffocated by strangers' opinions." Keanu stepped closer, his face softening. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I wish I could shield you from all this. I never wanted you to go through this because of me. If I could take it all back, I would." Sarah looked up at him, her chest tight. "I know you didn't mean for it to happen like this. But now I have to deal with it. All of it. The judgment, the constant eyes on me, the questions. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. I don't know if I can handle living under this kind of spotlight." Keanu's expression was pained, his brow furrowed. "You don't have to go through it alone. We'll figure this out. Together. If it gets too much, we'll find a way to navigate it. We'll set boundaries. I won't let this tear us apart." She wanted to believe him. She truly did. But the reality of their situation was setting in. She was already feeling overwhelmed, and the idea of having to constantly defend herself, to explain her choices to the world, seemed like an insurmountable challenge. "I don't know if I'm cut out for this, Keanu," she said softly, her voice cracking with emotion. "I thought I was strong. But now I feel like I'm drowning." Keanu took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You are strong. But it's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to not have all the answers right now. I'm here. I won't let you go through this alone." She let out a shaky breath and looked down at their joined hands. Despite everything, despite the fear and the uncertainty, she felt something deep inside her. It was a flicker of hope, a glimmer of the bond they had built over the last few weeks. "I don't want to lose what we have," Sarah whispered. "You won't," Keanu replied firmly. "I promise you, we won't lose this. But we're going to have to work through it. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it work. For you, for us." She looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and for the first time since the photos had gone viral, Sarah felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect solution, and she didn't know how it would all turn out, but in that moment, she knew that whatever came next, she wouldn't be facing it alone. The next few days were a whirlwind. Keanu took steps to address the media frenzy, issuing a statement confirming their relationship and asking for privacy. He even went as far as to limit his public appearances for a while, hoping to give Sarah the space she needed to adjust. But despite his efforts, the spotlight on their relationship didn't fade. Everywhere Sarah went, people stared. When she went to the grocery store, she heard whispers behind her back. When she walked through the park, there were eyes following her, phone cameras hidden behind bushes. No one cared about the quiet moments they had shared. All they cared about was the story, the spectacle, the drama. One evening, when Sarah was feeling particularly worn down from the constant attention, she found herself sitting in the cafe alone, sipping on a cup of tea. The rain was falling outside, and the cafe was nearly empty. It was one of those rare moments when she could breathe without the pressure of the world watching. Keanu walked in, his eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. A smile tugged at his lips when he saw her sitting there. He made his way over to her and sat down, his presence like a warm shield from the chaos outside. "How's your day been?" he asked, his voice gentle. Sarah shrugged, the exhaustion evident in her eyes. "It's been a lot. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep pretending that it doesn't bother me." Keanu took a deep breath and reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "We don't have to pretend, Sarah. It's okay to feel like this is too much. But I promise you, I'm here for you. I'll do whatever I can to make it easier." She looked at him, searching his face for reassurance. And in that moment, she realized that despite the storm they were facing, there was something undeniable between them. A trust. A connection that neither the media nor the public could tear apart. "I don't know where this is going," Sarah said quietly. "But I know I don't want to do it without you." Keanu smiled, his thumb stroking her hand tenderly. "Then we'll take it one step at a time, together." And as the rain poured outside, Sarah felt a flicker of hope stir within her. Maybe the world was watching, maybe it was overwhelming, but she wasn't alone. And for now, that was enough. The following weeks brought more of the same, constant public attention, the occasional paparazzi sightings, and the ever-present online buzz about Sarah and Keanu's relationship. But as the storm of media attention swirled around them, something shifted in Sarah. She had been overwhelmed at first, suffocating under the weight of strangers' opinions, but now, she was learning to navigate it. Keanu had kept his promise. He shielded her from the worst of the storm, making sure their moments of peace were still theirs to enjoy. They spent quiet evenings together at his house or in small, intimate cafes, where the noise of the outside world couldn't touch them. But Sarah wasn't naive. She knew the scrutiny wouldn't stop, and soon enough, they would have to face the real challenge, figuring out how their relationship could survive this constant pressure. One afternoon, while Keanu was away on a brief trip for work, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, reflecting on everything. The baby, now well into her second trimester, was growing stronger every day. She had started to feel more connected to the little one inside her, a growing sense of responsibility and love that was both overwhelming and beautiful. She hadn't been sure how she would balance everything, her unexpected pregnancy, her burgeoning relationship with Keanu, and the life she had built for herself so far. But as time went on, she began to see a path forward, even if it wasn't perfectly clear. It was late one evening when Keanu called her. His voice came through the phone with a hint of excitement. "Sarah, I've been thinking," he said, his tone lighter than usual. "I know it's been a lot, but I've got an idea." "What kind of idea?" she asked, curious. "I've been talking with my team, and we've been discussing how we can make this work without all the chaos. It's not going to be easy, but I think I can find a way for us to have more privacy. I want you to feel safe, to feel like this is still our life, not just something for the public to consume." Sarah's heart fluttered with a mix of relief and curiosity. Keanu had never been anything but genuine in his care for her, but this was something new. A promise that they could still have a life apart from the public eye. "That sounds amazing," Sarah said, her voice soft. "What are you thinking?" He paused for a moment, as if trying to gather his thoughts. "What if we found a place to live together, away from the spotlight? Somewhere that's truly ours, where we don't have to hide but can live a life free from the prying eyes? I'm willing to invest in a place, and I'll make sure it's discreet. We can take our time, away from the public, and really decide how we want to move forward." Sarah was silent for a moment, her mind racing with the possibilities. A home, just for them. A place where they could share quiet mornings, private moments, and build the foundation for their future, away from the chaos of the media. It was exactly what she had been craving but hadn't known how to ask for. "I don't want to rush anything, Keanu," Sarah said softly. "But I think that's a beautiful idea. And it sounds like a place we can truly start fresh." Keanu's voice was filled with warmth and sincerity. "I agree. We'll take it one step at a time. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah. I'm with you. Always." Her heart swelled with emotion. The idea of having a space that was truly theirs, where they could navigate their future together, felt like the first step toward creating a new beginning. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, and they still had challenges to face, especially with her pregnancy, but for the first time, Sarah felt hopeful. The next few weeks were spent quietly preparing for this new chapter. Keanu worked behind the scenes to find the perfect property. He wanted it to be secluded enough to provide privacy, but still close enough to their families and friends. Sarah focused on preparing for the arrival of the baby, attending doctor's appointments, and getting her life in order. As Keanu and Sarah made plans for their new home, Sarah realized something: no matter how difficult things had been, no matter how overwhelming the spotlight had felt, she had never felt more sure of one thing: she was ready for this new beginning. They had faced the unknown together, and with each challenge, they had grown stronger. Now, as they looked ahead to their future, the unknown was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. The baby, their relationship, their life together, it was all part of the new beginning they were building. A life they could shape with love, patience, and trust. One afternoon, as Sarah sat in their small, temporary apartment, she felt a gentle kick from her baby. A smile spread across her face as she rested her hands on her growing belly. In that moment, she knew that whatever the future held, it would be worth it. Keanu had proven that love, when it's real, can conquer even the most daunting obstacles. And though there would be tough moments ahead, Sarah no longer felt like she was facing them alone. With Keanu by her side, with their baby on the way, and with a new chapter unfolding before her, Sarah felt the stirrings of something deep within her, an unshakable belief that she could face whatever challenges came their way. The big day finally came. Sarah stood in front of a full-length mirror, examining herself. She was no longer the young woman who had sat in a cafe, unsure of her place in the world. She had transformed, not just in the way her body had changed, but in the way she had come to understand what it meant to love, to trust, and to build a life with someone. Her heart raced as she adjusted the neckline of her dress, the baby bump gently curving outward. There was a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the anticipation of the day. It was something deeper, a feeling of contentment, of knowing that no matter how uncertain the world could be, there was a constant, a foundation in Keanu's love. As she stepped out into the hallway of their new home, she found Keanu waiting for her, his eyes lighting up as he saw her. "You look stunning," he whispered, his voice filled with awe. Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of affection wash over her. She could see the future unfolding before them, one filled with both joy and challenges, but a future they would tackle together. "I can't believe we're here," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Keanu nodded, taking her hand in his. "It's just the beginning, Sarah. The best is yet to come." And as they walked out into the world, their world, Sarah knew that the future, uncertain as it may be, was theirs to shape together. And that was all that mattered.